She gave her seat to an old woman on the train, but what she heard during the ride. Emma didn't normally take the 5:47 p.m. train. She was a creature of routine: second coffee at 3 o'clock, inbox cleared by 5:30, headphones in by 5:35. But today had been off. Her boss had kept her behind to talk about a new marketing campaign, something urgent that turned into a half-hour rant about brand engagement. By the time Emma escaped the building, the sun was already sinking low behind the New York skyline, and she knew the next train would be packed. She was right. The car was jammed, shoulder to shoulder with tired commuters, students, and the usual blend of subway oddities. The air smelled like a cocktail of street food, sweat, and late-day exhaustion. Emma squeezed in near the doors and scanned for a seat. Miraculously, she saw one just before an elderly woman stepped onto the train, clutching a worn leather handbag and swaying with the movement of the car. Without thinking, Emma stood. "Ma'am, please. You can have my seat." The woman hesitated for a moment, her gaze meeting Emma's. There was something in her eyes, a flicker of surprise, maybe even fear, before she nodded and lowered herself slowly onto the plastic seat. "Thank you, dear," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma smiled politely and moved to stand beside her. The train pulled forward with a jolt. For the next few minutes, they rode in silence. Emma scrolled through her phone, half watching videos, half daydreaming. Then the woman spoke again. "People don't usually look twice at someone like me." Emma turned. "I think they should." The woman smiled faintly, the corners of her mouth trembling. "You remind me of someone. Someone I knew. Once." There was a quiet, pregnant pause. Emma wasn't sure whether to respond or let it go, but something in the woman's voice held her there, waiting. "I used to take this train every day," the woman continued. "Back when I still had a home to go to." Emma's heart thudded. "You don't anymore?" The old woman shook her head slowly. "No. Not since Harold passed. Not since the house was taken." She said it with such a soft finality that it didn't sound tragic, just finished. Like something old and broken, buried under too many winters. "I'm so sorry," Emma said. The woman gave her a long look. "Don't be. Life is a train ride, dear. You board it, ride with some people for a while, and then, well, you get off." They rode in silence again. The train screeched into the next station. A few people shuffled off. More got on. Emma felt a pressure in her chest, something rising, not pity, but a strange, aching awareness. The kind you feel when you suddenly realize a stranger is far more than a passing blur. The woman reached into her handbag and pulled out a small, yellowed photograph. She held it out. "This was me and my daughter, before the silence." Emma took the photo. It was curled at the edges, creased from too many folds. In it, a young woman with bright eyes held a toddler in her arms. They were laughing. Sunlight bathed them in golden warmth. "She was my everything," the woman said, her voice breaking slightly. "What happened to her?" Emma asked gently. "She disappeared. One rainy October evening. Just never came home from school. Police said it might have been foul play, but no one was ever found." Emma's breath caught. "I waited. Every day. For years. Thinking maybe she got lost. Maybe she forgot. Maybe she'd just walk in the door one day and say, 'Hi, Mom.'" She wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. She never did. Emma didn't know what to say. Her hand closed softly around the photograph, then returned it to the woman, who tucked it back into her bag like it was a sacred relic. "Do you still wait for her?" Emma whispered. The woman looked out the window, at the blur of buildings and night shadows. I wait for the idea of her, the sound of her voice, the hope that someone will remember she existed." A long moment passed. "I remember now," Emma said, her voice thick. "You told me. So I'll remember too." The woman smiled, really smiled for the first time. "Then she lives again. For a little while." As the train approached another station, the woman stood. "This is my stop." Emma blinked. "Wait, can I help you? Do you need anything? A ride, maybe? Or coffee?" The woman shook her head. "No, dear. You've already given me the most precious thing." Emma frowned. "What's that?" "Your time." And with that, the woman stepped off the train. Emma watched her vanish into the crowd, her small frame swallowed by the current of bodies and city lights. When she turned back, her seat was gone. Another tired passenger had taken it. The moment passed like a breath. But something had shifted, deep inside her. A knot untied. A tether formed. She didn't know the woman's name. She didn't know if any of it had been true. But somehow it didn't matter. She would remember her. And that was enough. The train clattered on, a hollow echo lingering in Emma's chest. She stood there for several more stops, dazed, the woman's story looping in her mind like a melody she couldn't shake. She wasn't even sure when she got off the train, just that she walked the 4 blocks home without checking her phone once. Her apartment was dim, quiet. She sank into the couch and stared out the window. Who was she? Had any of it been real? Or was it just the sad ramblings of an old soul, forgotten by the world? Emma found herself wishing she'd asked for a name. A last name. Something to hold on to. But maybe that was the point. Maybe that encounter was never meant to be tethered to anything permanent. Still, she couldn't let it go. The next morning, Emma was different. At the office, she clicked through her emails distractedly. Her coworkers' chatter faded into static. When her boss asked her about the project timeline, she nodded blankly. That woman's voice echoed in her head. People don't usually look twice at someone like me. At lunch, Emma found herself Googling. Missing daughter, New York City, 1970s, train silence, October. Dozens of results popped up. She narrowed it down by borough, then by approximate year. And then she saw it. October 17th, 1976, Brooklyn, New York. 13-year-old Lillian May Carter vanished after school. Mother, Eleanor Carter. She never came home. I know in my bones something happened. The case had gone cold in 1979. Emma stared at the grainy black and white photo of Eleanor and her daughter, the same image she had been shown on the train. Her breath hitched. It was real. She clicked deeper. The more she read, the more unsettled she felt. Eleanor had never moved, never remarried. She'd stayed in the same apartment, living alone for decades, haunted by what-ifs. There were no updates past 1984. Nothing more recent. Like she'd vanished. That night, Emma took the 547 again. She rode the same train, sat in the same spot. She waited, but the old woman never came. Not the next day, or the day after. By Friday, Emma was obsessing. She found a local subreddit and posted a question. Anyone ever seen this woman on the Brooklyn-bound L train? Older, kind face, talks about her missing daughter. Someone replied a few hours later. You mean Eleanor Carter? She used to sit outside my uncle's bakery on 8th and Mercer. Always told the same story. Real sad. I haven't seen her in months. Emma felt something stir a direction. A thread. Saturday morning, she took the subway to 8th and Mercer. The bakery was still there, a small family-run place with faded signage and the smell of almond croissants wafting through the door. She stepped inside and asked the man at the counter about Eleanor. He nodded slowly. You're not the first to ask. She used to sit out front, on the bench. Same spot, every morning. Then around the holidays last year, she just stopped showing up. Did she pass away? Emma asked, her voice hushed. No idea, the man said. Cops came by once, asked about her. Said she was in a shelter for a while, then disappeared again. Woman was like a ghost. A ghost. The word rang loud in Emma's mind. She left the bakery and found the bench. Empty. Cracked. Weather-worn. She sat there for a while, thinking. It wasn't enough to remember the woman. She needed to do something. The next week, Emma went to the NYPL archives. She combed through microfilm, read old newspaper clippings, pulled death records and shelter intakes. Days blurred together. Nights stretched long. She even reached out to a retired detective who had worked the Carter case. Some people, he told her over the phone, never stopped looking. I think Eleanor was one of them. We never found Lillian. No body. No trail. It haunted her. Still haunts me. Do you think Eleanor's still alive? She asked. There was a long pause. If she is, she's hiding. Or lost. Or worse. Emma bit her lip. She doesn't deserve to be forgotten. No, the detective said. She doesn't. Emma started documenting what she'd found. Every photo, every article, every word Eleanor had told her. She wrote it out at first in fragments, then full pages. She titled it, The Woman on the Train. And somewhere in the telling, it became more than just a tribute. It became a calling. Emma contacted a podcast producer. A small one, indie but honest. She pitched the story. They agreed to meet. Within a week, Emma was in a soundproof booth, recording her voice as she told the story of Eleanor Carter, how they met, what she said, what was lost, and what remained. They fact-checked everything, cross-referenced timelines, interviewed people who remembered Eleanor. The first episode dropped 3 weeks later. It went viral. People shared it, commented, sent in tips. One night, Emma received an email with no subject line. Just a name, Lillian Carter? She opened it. I think I knew her. We were in the same 8th grade homeroom. She was quiet, sweet, always carried a blue notebook. I remember one day she was crying. Said someone was following her home. Emma's skin prickled. The podcast crew dove into it. Found old classmates. One remembered seeing a man in a green truck idling outside the school for weeks. They tracked the truck to a known offender in the 1970s who had lived 2 blocks from Lillian. He died in 1996. The trail ended there. But the attention reignited interest in the case. A detective from the cold case unit called Emma. Asked her to come in. They reopened the file. On the 5th episode of the podcast, Emma read a letter her own addressed to Eleanor. You may never hear this. You may be gone. But I want you to know your daughter mattered. Her story mattered. You kept her alive every time you told it. And now I will too. The day that episode aired, Emma returned to the train. She sat in the same seat, stared at the same smudge window. And for a second, only a second, she saw her. Eleanor. Standing by the door. Wearing the same faded coat. Her eyes tired but calm. Emma blinked. The woman was gone. But in her chest, Emma felt it. A quiet peace. As if somewhere, someone had heard her. As if a life unlived had finally been witnessed. Emma had never thought of herself as someone who could make a difference in the world. She wasn't an activist. She didn't work for a nonprofit or write award-winning journalism. She designed advertisements for cereal and toothpaste and spent most nights watching reruns of shows she could quote by heart. But ever since she gave her seat to that woman, her life had taken on a strange new gravity, like she'd been pulled into an orbit she hadn't even known existed. Something ancient and aching. A story unfinished. She'd always thought life moved forward one moment replaced by the next. But Eleanor Carter had shown her otherwise. Some moments echo. Some cling. The podcast episodes kept gaining traction. By week 6, Emma's inbox was flooded. Teachers who remembered Lillian. Retired officers who had bits of the original case files. A woman from Queens swore she'd seen Eleanor wandering near a church last winter, barefoot in the snow. One message stood out. I don't know if this helps, but I used to work at a group home in Staten Island. We had a resident in 2018. Elderly. No ID. Called herself L. Always asked if the train was coming soon. She'd sit on the bench out front every day for hours. Staring. Waiting. Emma replied immediately. 2 days later, she was on a ferry heading to Staten Island, clutching a manila folder with printed emails and a photograph of Eleanor folded neatly inside. The group home was small, quiet. A nurse met her at the door. Yes, I remember her, the nurse said softly. Didn't speak much. Liked to hum old jazz tunes. And she'd always carry that same photo. Emma showed her the image. That's her, the nurse whispered. That's definitely her. Emma felt a flood of emotion rise in her chest. Where is she now? The nurse's face fell. She left one night. Just walked out. We filed a report, of course. But there wasn't much we could do. She was very kind. But very gone, if you know what I mean. Emma nodded slowly. She knew exactly what she meant. Gone not just physically, but drifting. Unanchored by time. Still, the knowledge gave her something she hadn't had before. Proof. Eleanor existed. Her story wasn't a hallucination or the mind's trick. She was real, and someone remembered her. Emma took the ferry home in silence. Later that week, Emma was invited to speak on a live panel about unsolved cases and the power of storytelling. She sat beside 2 retired detectives, a forensic psychologist, and a host from a national true crime show. When her turn came, she stood, clutching a copy of the photo Eleanor had given her. This story started with a seat on a train, she began. I didn't expect anything from it. I thought I was just being polite. But that one act opened the door to a life no one had looked at in decades. She paused. Eleanor didn't ask for justice. She didn't even ask for help. She just wanted to be heard. To know that someone, even one person, saw her pain. Her daughter's story. She lifted the photo. This is Lillian Carter. She disappeared in 1976. She was never found. But through her mother's memory, she still speaks. Through all of you listening, she still matters. The crowd was silent. Then came the applause. 2 weeks later, something strange happened. Emma was walking home after something stopped her. There, spray painted in black over the bricks, were 5 words. I remember her too. E. Emma froze. She looked around. The street was empty. A bus rumbled past on the overpass above, sending a small shudder through the sidewalk. She stepped closer. The paint was fresh. She reached out and touched the letters. They were still slightly wet. Her heart thudded. Was this from Eleanor? Had she somehow heard the podcast? Was she still out there, listening? Or was it someone else, a stranger, echoing back what Emma had started? She took a photo of the wall, stood there for a moment, stunned. And then, for the first time in weeks, she smiled. That night, Emma recorded a bonus episode. She called it The Wall. She described the graffiti, how it looked, where it was, what it meant. It's easy to forget people when they slip through the cracks, she said into the mic, but sometimes, if you listen closely enough, they call back. After she finished recording, she sat in her apartment in the dim glow of the streetlight, thinking. She thought about Eleanor, somewhere out there maybe watching, maybe gone. She thought about the thousands of people who had heard the podcast, read the story, shared their memories. And she thought about Lillian, a little girl lost to time, now remembered by millions. Because of a story, because of a moment, because Emma gave up a seat on a crowded train. The podcast ended its first season with a message from Emma. Eleanor, if you're out there, this is for you. You didn't vanish. You mattered. You still do. And I promise, wherever I go, I'll carry your story with me. That night, as the final episode aired, Emma received a single email. No address. No subject line. Just one sentence. Thank you for writing with me. No name. Just that. Emma stared at the screen, tears filling her eyes. She typed a reply. Always. She hit send. Even if no one was on the other end, it didn't matter. Somehow, she knew Eleanor had heard her. Somehow, she knew Eleanor was at peace. The weeks passed, but the echo of Eleanor's voice refused to fade. Emma resumed her daily routines, riding the train, going to work, editing new podcast pitches, but everything felt somehow transformed. The ordinary world had opened, like a curtain drawn back to reveal the space between things. A hidden current of pain and memory beneath every city street. One morning, as autumn leaves began to scatter the sidewalks, Emma got a call from the NYPD cold case unit. We've got something, the officer said. Her heart kicked into overdrive. What is it? We ran DNA analysis on some archived evidence from Lillian's case. Back then, testing wasn't as advanced. But we've recently been digitizing and reprocessing old materials. Emma barely breathed. There was a notebook, he continued. Blue cover, water damaged. Her name was written on the inside. It had fingerprints. Partial, but good enough. We finally matched it to a suspect. Emma felt herself go cold. Who? Eugene Miles. Deceased. Died in 1996, just like you mentioned on the podcast. Convicted in a similar disappearance case in Connecticut in '79. We always suspected he was involved in more, but we didn't have enough to tie him to anything else. And now we do. Emma sat down, stunned. So it's him? He took her. All signs point to yes. The officer was quiet for a moment, then added, I thought you'd want to know. You're the reason we pulled this out of storage in the first place. Emma swallowed hard. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for telling me. That night, she sat at her desk and stared at the image of Eleanor on her wall. Her eyes so heavy, so patient, seemed to meet Emma's gaze across time. I found him, Emma whispered. And then the tears came, not fast, not loud. Just a quiet flood of sorrow, relief, and something like closure. She thought it would feel more triumphant. It didn't. It felt still, like standing at the edge of a lake that's finally stopped rippling. The next podcast season wasn't about Eleanor or Lillian. It was about the forgotten. Emma profiled missing people, unsolved cases, cold trails. Each one centered on the silence left behind, the parents still searching, the siblings still wondering, the friends who never got to say goodbye. The season was called Echoes. Episode 1, The Girl Who Vanished at Noon. Episode 2, The Photo Left Behind. Episode 3, The Bench on 8th and Mercer. The last episode was different. It was about Emma, her own story. How a stranger on a train shattered the wall she didn't know she built between herself and the world. How it made her care again, not in a passive, sympathetic way, but in a way that changed the course of her life. She ended the episode with this. We don't know how much we need each other until the moment we look into someone's eyes and see our own pain reflected back. Eleanor didn't ask me to fix anything. She asked me to listen. So I did. And now, so many others are listening too. The podcast was picked up by a national network. Emma was offered a book deal. Her face appeared in interviews, panels, streaming platforms. But she never let the story go too far from its roots. She kept Eleanor's photo by her bedside. She rode the L train every Friday, hoping for a glimpse of that worn coat, that soft gaze. Sometimes she brought flowers and left them on the bench near the bakery, just in case. She never saw the old woman again. But sometimes she swore she felt her. In the hush of the subway tunnel. In the shadow near the closing doors. In the faint jazz melody played by a street musician on a rainy morning. One late evening, as winter returned to the city, Emma received a letter in her mailbox. A real one stamped, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a small photograph. Old. Worn. It showed Eleanor and Lillian on a picnic blanket in Prospect Park. Lillian was maybe 8. Her hair in braids, her arms wrapped around her mother's neck. Eleanor looked young, vibrant, laughing at something off camera. On the back was one sentence. "Thank you for giving her back to me." Emma sat on the floor and cried. Months later, the NYPD placed a plaque at the bench near 8th and Mercer. It read, "In memory of Lillian Carter. Vanished, but never forgotten." Her mother kept the light burning, and someone listened. Emma stood there during the small ceremony, quiet, her hands clasped in front of her. Strangers showed up. People who had heard the podcast. Listeners who'd sent in tips. One brought a blue notebook and placed it gently beneath the bench. Someone whispered, "She's free now." Emma nodded. "She is." Back on the train, months later, Emma found herself seated across from a young woman reading a newspaper. The woman looked up and smiled politely. Then, noticing Emma, her eyes lit up. "Wait," she said. "Aren't you the one who made that podcast? The one about the old woman and the missing girl?" Emma blinked. "Yes," she said slowly. "That's me." The woman leaned forward. "That story stayed with me. I even gave up my seat last week to this man who looked so tired. I don't know why, but I thought of you." Emma smiled softly. Funny how these things echo. The train slowed. The doors opened. The woman stood. "Thank you," she said again before stepping off. Emma remained seated, her heart full. Outside, the city moved on loud, restless, alive. But somewhere, beneath the noise, the past was still speaking. And Emma was still listening. After the ceremony, Emma stayed behind while the crowd slowly drifted away. The bench felt sacred now not because it had been marked by the city, but because of the memories it held. She sat on it gently, as though not to disturb the silence. In her lap was a worn manila folder. Inside were clippings, police notes, podcast transcripts. She flipped through them absent-mindedly, unsure why she still carried them. Maybe she needed to keep a piece of it with her. Maybe it felt like if she let it go, Eleanor would vanish again. She was startled when a soft voice broke the quiet. "Do you mind if I sit?" An older man, maybe in his 70s, stood beside the bench. His hair was white and wispy, his eyes pale with time, but kind. Emma nodded and scooted over. "You were part of the thing here earlier, weren't you?" he asked. "Yes. I made the podcast. About Lillian." He nodded slowly. "Heard about it on the news. Thought I'd come by." They sat in silence for a moment. Then the man said something that made Emma turn to him, heart suddenly still. "I knew Eleanor Carter." Emma's mouth went dry. You knew her?" He gave a small smile. "A long time ago. Before everything. I was a city clerk, worked in public records. She used to come in once a month, asking for updates. Always so polite. Always brought cookies. She never gave up, you know." Emma leaned forward, holding her breath. "Did you ever see her? After?" The man nodded. "Last time I saw her was maybe 10, 15 years ago. She came by, older then. Didn't ask about records. Just said thank you. Told me I had been kind when others weren't." His eyes grew distant. "I never forgot her. That kind of grief. It stains the soul. But she wore it with dignity." Emma blinked rapidly. "Thank you for telling me." He smiled again. "She'd be proud of you, you know." Then he rose, tipped his head, and walked off. Emma sat there a long time. That evening, as a chill settled over the city, Emma took the L train the same route, same time, same car, if she could help it. She sat by the window and watched the stations blur past. Her reflection hovered in the glass, half shadow, half light. At one point, A girl maybe 12 sat across from her. She wore a bright pink jacket and carried a violin case. She looked nervous, like she was headed to an audition. Emma smiled. The girl smiled back. Big day? Emma asked gently. The girl nodded. Recital. My first solo. Play what you feel, Emma said. They'll remember that more than the notes. The girl beamed. Thanks. At the next stop, she stood and waved before hopping off into the crowd. Emma leaned back and closed her eyes. That's what Eleanor had done past the story forward. And now, so had she. In December, Emma traveled upstate to visit Eleanor's old neighborhood, a place that had long since changed names and owners. The house Eleanor once lived in was now a law office. But the trees out front still stood, tall and bare in winter silence. A woman working inside let Emma walk around the front yard. She found herself drawn to the steps. There, carved faintly into the wood of the railing, were two initials. E+L. Emma traced them with her gloved fingers. Two women, a mother and a daughter, still holding space in the world. Later that night, back in her hotel room, Emma sat with her laptop and began to write. Not an episode, not a transcript. A book. It began simply. She gave up her seat on the train, and the world cracked open. By March, her first draft was complete. She titled it The Seat. Her publisher called it haunting and hopeful, a quiet revolution in story form. But Emma didn't care about the reviews. She cared about one thing, that somewhere, in some small corner of the universe, Eleanor might feel it, might know that the ripple never stopped. That spring, something unexpected arrived in the mail. A small box. No name. No return address. Inside was a folded piece of fabric, faded, woolen, familiar. Emma pulled it out slowly. It was Eleanor's coat, the one she'd worn on the train. In the pocket was a slip of paper. Just one line. She was never alone. Emma sat on the edge of her bed and wept. Not because she was sad, but because, for the first time in a long time, she believed it. None of us are. Not truly. Not if someone, somewhere, is still listening. The final episode of her podcast aired on the anniversary of the day she met Eleanor. It was quiet. Just her voice. No music. I don't know where she is, Emma said. Maybe she's gone. Maybe she's watching. But I do know this: she taught me how to pay attention, to notice the invisible, to choose kindness, even when the world looks away. She paused. So if you're riding the train tonight and you see someone who looks lost, offer them your seat. Maybe you won't hear a story. Maybe you'll just share a moment. But that's how it begins. That's how we save each other. Spring melted into summer. The city bloomed. Windows opened again. Sidewalk cafes filled with laughter. Life unpredictable, chaotic, unrelenting carried on. Emma didn't publish another podcast right away. She let silence take its place. Not because she had nothing more to say, but because she knew the most meaningful things often arrived in stillness. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. Letters began pouring in. Hundreds, then thousands. From listeners across the country. From people who'd lost siblings, children, parents. From strangers who'd given up their seats on buses, trains, and planes and found themselves changed by the briefest human contact. One letter, handwritten on soft lavender paper, stood out. Emma read it under the warm light of her kitchen table one quiet Sunday. Dear Emma, my sister disappeared in 1974. For decades, I carried that ache like a shadow. I never told anyone outside the family. I thought it was too late for anyone to care. Then I listened to your story about Eleanor. You reminded me that grief doesn't vanish, it transforms. So I finally spoke her name again. To my granddaughter. Thank you for making the silence feel less empty. Emma pressed the letter to her chest. There it was again, that quiet ripple. By autumn, Emma stood in front of a packed auditorium at a storytelling conference in Chicago. The theme was ordinary moments that changed everything. When it was her turn to speak, she didn't use slides. She simply told the story. The train, the seat, Eleanor, the confession, the aftermath. She ended with, I sat down one morning expecting a quiet commute, but I stood up carrying someone's history. That's the power of listening. It's not passive. It's how we carry the weight of each other's truth. The room was silent, and then a standing ovation. Afterward, a woman in the back, early 60s, hair tied back, eyes red, approached her. I gave up my daughter for adoption in 1980, she whispered. Never told a soul, but you made me think. Maybe she deserves to know I never stopped thinking about her. Emma didn't say anything at first. She just reached for the woman's hand and held it tight. One night, while walking through Brooklyn, Emma saw a familiar face. A teenage boy sat at a subway station bench, hunched, earbuds in, hoodie drawn tight. She might have walked past him except something in his posture struck her. She sat down beside him. He glanced at her, surprised, then looked away. Minutes passed. Finally, Emma said gently, "You okay?" The boy hesitated, then shrugged. "Ran away from home." "That fight?" He nodded. "My mom, she said I don't listen. But I do. I just don't always know what to say back." Emma smiled softly. "Listening is a good start." They sat quietly for a while longer. Then the boy stood up. "You think she misses me?" he asked. "I think she never stopped." He gave her a long look. "Thanks, lady." And then he walked out into the night. Back home, Emma placed a pin on her wall map, another invisible thread between two strangers. The map had become a quiet obsession. Each pin marked a story someone had sent her. Not names, not cities. Just a moment where one human life brushed against another and something changed. It wasn't data. It wasn't for show. It was memory. Proof that we matter to each other, even when we don't know it yet. One evening, nearly a year after her first encounter with Eleanor, Emma returned to the L train. The car was nearly empty. She sat in the same seat, the one she had offered that day. The window reflected her older face, now subtly altered by time and truth. She'd never noticed how deeply stories carved into us. At the next stop, the door slid open. An older woman stepped in. Gray hair, pressed coat, distant eyes. She looked tired. Without thinking, Emma stood. "Please," she said, "take my seat." The woman blinked in surprise, then smiled warmly. "Thank you, dear." Emma stood nearby, holding the rail, heart swelling with memory. They rode in silence for 5 stops. Then, just before the woman stood to leave, she said softly, "You look like someone who listens." Emma nodded. "I try." The woman placed a gentle hand on Emma's arm. "Then keep listening." And she was gone. That night, Emma sat at her desk and began writing again. Not a podcast. Not a book. A letter. To the person reading this. If you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or forgotten, I want you to know something. There's someone out there waiting for your story. And sometimes all it takes is a seat on a train. 1 year later, the plaque near 8th and Mercer was joined by another. This one read, "To those who listen, who offer their seat, their ear, their heart. You are changing the world one story at a time." People left candles, photos, postcards. Some even sat quietly for hours, headphones in, eyes closed. Listening, hoping, remembering. Epilogue. Emma's book, The Seat, became a national bestseller, but she never let the success distract her from the purpose. She started a foundation, the Listening Bench. It placed quiet, dedicated benches in subways, parks, hospitals, each with a simple plaque. Need someone to hear you? Sit down. Someone's listening. Volunteers joined. Retirees. College students. Strangers. No therapy. No advice. Just presence. One seat. One story at a time. Years later, a young woman boarded the L train. She looked exhausted, overworked. Her eyes scanned for a place to sit. An older woman wrapped in a familiar wool coat stood and offered her seat with a smile. The young woman hesitated. "Are you sure?" The older woman nodded. "Yes. Someone once did the same for me, and it changed everything." The young woman sat, confused but grateful. She never knew that seat held a story. That long ago, in that same spot, a girl named Emma met an old woman named Eleanor. And the world shifted. Quietly. Permanently. The end.